Welcome. My name is Frank Luwach. I am a first violinist in the Wilmer Orchestra, and I'm also president of the Orchestra Board of Directors. Now you're going to have the opportunity to meet members of the Wilmer Orchestra. They're going to show you their instruments. They're also going to tell you why they decided to learn how to play an instrument, and also tell you how they feel about playing in the orchestra. So, here they are.
I love playing in an orchestra, and one of the best things is when we all practice, work on our parts, learn our music alone, and then come together and tell a story or create a mood. And it creates a sense of almost magic, especially when we're on stage with a wonderful audience.
What I love most about my violin is that it's been with me for over 55 years. And it's kind of like a friend, and it also brings me together with other friends. It's like a voice, and it can make music that you can't put into words.
So if you're in a spot where you aren't in an orchestra or aren't in a group, you can still play this instrument and enjoy making music by yourself, and then maybe get into a group later on.
I started playing the cello when I was 10, because in my school, like Wilmer Public Schools, in 4th grade, you can choose a string instrument if you want to. I kind of liked this one that was bigger than the violin, and I've been playing that ever since. I love the cello because of all the music it can play. I'm going to play a piece from that, Carnival of the Animals, and I want you to silently, in your brain, guess which animal the cello is trying to describe.
Doing the orchestra is something that I enjoy, getting to work with people and make awesome music and get to play for wonderful audience people like yourselves. So I'll be doing the part of the first movement of Franz Schubert's Arpeggio Sonata.
One thing that I love about the string bass is that you can use it to play basically any style of music you want. Almost anything that you listen to already, any song, has some kind of string bass instrument in it. And I'm going to be playing a song written for me by my friend Kim Osberg, and it's meant to sound like the morning of a fun wedding dance.
When I started, I was 13 years old. The trumpet, it's a tubing, as I can show to you, with the end like a bell. You can make this with your parents and you can have some fun. Maybe you can create some music. The piece that I'm playing right now, it's a Brazilian bossa nova. It's a very calm and peaceful melody.
I feel very lucky to be a French horn player. The beauty of the French horn is it has a more mellow tone, so I have played in brass groups, but I've also been able to play with woodwind instruments. The piece I'm playing today is called Wild Hunt by Schubert. I chose it because the origins of the French horn go back to when there were no valves or keys, and they were used to signal the start of a hunt.
This is my trombone, and I enjoy this instrument because it's very simple. There are no valves. The trombone is known as the voice of God in the orchestra, so I'm not sure that this is really how God sounds, but that's our tradition. I'm going to play two very short pieces that demonstrate the types of music that can be played on this instrument.
What's so special about playing the tuba in the orchestra? I'll tell you, you're the only guy there playing the tuba. But the real reason that I enjoy playing for the orchestra is playing with all the other musicians around you. We're all doing different crazy things at the same time, and yet when it all comes together, it's beautiful. So I've got a little folk number that I'm going to play for you. It doesn't really have a name, that's why it's called a folk tune.
I've played the flute for 53 years. I started playing it when I was 10 years old. When I was a real little girl, my mom took me to a live orchestra concert in Kansas City, and I got to hear Peter and the Wolf. A few years ago, the Wilmer Area Symphonic Orchestra played Peter and the Wolf for a children's concert, and I got to play the part of the bird on my flute. So that's what I'm going to play a little bit of for you.
The oboe looks like this, and it can play very high notes, and it can play very low notes too. And we make sound by blowing through this double reed, which is essentially two very, very thin pieces of wood. Bob and I are going to play a little bit from a pavane composed by Gabriel Fauré.
I think the clarinet is the coolest instrument because it can play low notes like a trombone. Loud notes like a trumpet. And crazy high notes like a flute. With my clarinet, I have had the privilege to travel all over the world. Now I share my love of music by teaching kids on Zoom and in classrooms. I get to play fun music all the time.
I love playing percussion. You can play any genre, any style of music with percussion, which makes percussion so flexible because you can play anything with it. Why don't we sample some percussion instruments?
Well, we're back. You had the opportunity to hear from members of the Wilmer Orchestra, and the purpose in doing that was to possibly create some interest on your part to think about learning an instrument and maybe potentially being a part of the orchestra in the future. We'd also like to thank Graywood Films for putting this film together. We'd like to thank our music director, Stephen Ramsey, and the musicians and board members of the Wilmer Orchestra. We'd like to thank the Wilmer Public Schools for being able to use the WIAC for rehearsals and performances. We'd like to thank our community for the support that they have provided us in the past and in the future. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits, 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.